the series Tips and Strategies. Presentation 4, the power of repetition. This presentation focuses on the use of repetition as a teaching strategy. 6 points will be discussed that relate repetition to the SMILES program. Here are 6 ideas and tips that can be used. Use classroom displays to repeatedly expose students to content. Create a classroom reading station to offer students repeated exposure to stories. Use daily story time to facilitate learning to read the story. Review and discuss story questions daily to develop comprehension skills. Cover material orally as a class before having students complete it in written form. And lastly, the use of the inherent repetition and redundancy that is designed into the program itself. Point 1. Use classroom displays to repeatedly expose students to content. Here are some ideas for 3 different displays of words students can be exposed to on a daily basis. The shiny words display. On this display, post all the shiny words learned or introduced to date. The new words display. This can be started at the very beginning of the lesson, as can the spelling list display. On these lists, post all the new words, whether they're just for reading or are also included for spelling. Here's an idea for an activity. The read the shiny words in and read the shiny words out. As students line up to either enter or exit the classroom, students ought to be challenged to read 2 or 3 shiny words on display, which should include the shiny words of the current lesson. Another activity is using the new words display as a learning station where students can practice decoding words. Students can practice reading independently or in pairs as reading buddies. The spelling list display can also be used for learning activities. At the beginning of the lesson, leave a stack of spelling sheets next to the spelling list display. During the lesson, students can visit the station individually or in small groups to practice writing the spelling words. Point 2. Create a classroom reading station to offer students repeated exposure to stories. The reading station ought to be in a less busy section of the classroom, likely away from the entrance. Provide comfortable floor seating for the students, such as cushions and a thick rug. Allow the area to accommodate up to 5 students and not more, otherwise it will get pretty busy in there. And provide reading materials that include the current and previously covered reading books. Students can use this reading area freely as part of reading time, an independent time during the lesson where students can sit and read. Use pairing in the form of reading buddies. Assign 2 students, which may be of varying reading skills, to read a story together. A third way that a reading station can be used is to challenge proficient and mastery level students. And this is best to occur in the later part of Set B. Provide access to short stories from outside the SMILES program and challenge proficient and mastery level students to attempt to read them. Point 3. Use daily story time to facilitate learning to read the story. Story time is a great way to start a lesson. Provide an area where the whole class can be seated comfortably on the floor, and make sure each student has a clear view of the displayed story pages. Listening to the story repeatedly on a daily basis and following along facilitates the process of learning to read. With repeated exposure, students may even start reading ahead. Story time as an activity is recommended to begin each day. The story is read aloud as students listen and follow along on the screen or in their reading books. Once the story is read, return to specific pages to emphasize learning points such as decoding of new words, new shiny words, identifying antonyms and synonyms, among other learning points deemed important. Students may also be asked to read particular words or sentences. Point 4. Review and discuss story questions daily to develop comprehension skills. Comprehension is a skill like any other skill, and it can be developed through repetition. Repeatedly asking similar questions and guiding students to arrive at an answer allows them to develop the skills required to answer other similar questions. They become familiar. When questions are reviewed and discussed as a whole class, students learn by both listening to others answer and by attempting to answer themselves. Again, use the story time activity described previously. After reading the story, discuss the oral section of comprehension. This allows students to develop their understanding of the story beyond what is literal and to share ideas and opinions. Even if the questions are asked on a daily basis, this repetition allows students to gain deeper insight into the story itself. It is also a great opportunity for students to practice answering incomplete sentences. This helps develop their grammar skills and their ability to express themselves. Point 5. Cover material orally as a class before having students complete it in written form. The goal of this strategy is to facilitate the completion of activities by first orally discussing and answering them as a class. So students are given the opportunity to explore concepts and develop a deeper understanding of the activity and its instructions. Students have time to assimilate the material before they are required to complete the activity in writing. This provides students the ability to work with a greater degree of independence and with lesser intervention from the teacher. Point 6. Use the inherent repetition and redundancy designed into the program to facilitate instruction. There is an intentional redundancy and repetition that is built into the program. And this is apparent in two forms. The first form is that activities in the activity books can be grouped into a handful of designs that are repeatedly used throughout the program. For example, color the picture, find the beginning, matching. These are all examples of activities in the activity books that keeps repeating. Even the structure of every lesson is repeated. This allows students to quickly become acquainted with any particular activity and to allow the lesson to flow more easily. Therefore, instructions do not need to be re-explained, and time and effort can be focused on the content of the activity rather than on its instructions, which should, over time, become familiar. This is also apparent in the oral comprehension questions. There is a specific structure to these questions that is followed repeatedly, lesson after lesson and story after story. Although these questions do develop in complexity over the course of the program, they still maintain a particular sequence and a specific style of wording. The goal of all this is making common things common, allowing instruction to focus on the more critical aspect, which is the content. The second form of redundancy is apparent between story pages, comprehension questions, and activities in the activity book. When a new word is introduced on a page in a story, it is also encountered in an activity in the activity book. The same word in the story shows up in the activity book. The new word, or even the whole sentence, is also likely to turn out to be an answer to a comprehension question. So incorporate into each lesson reading the story, well, a page of the story, answering the comprehension questions that pertain to that page, and complete any related activities in the activity book. This allows students to work in parallel and complete activities with greater ease. This concludes the fourth presentation of this series. The following presentation, titled Addressing Different Levels of Skill, follows.